Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, friends and family, to another episode of the New World Education Podcast. This is a universal education for a universal people. This podcast is sponsored by the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center. And today, I just want to once again thank my lovely co-host, Sister Gabrielle Muhammad, for blessing us with her presence and her knowledge and her wisdom on the set today. And we thank Sister Demoiselle Muhammad, who is our production manager and sound engineer, and a wonderful, wonderful asset and addition to the conversation. She always brings such insightful commentary to this topic of education. So we're very, very thankful for having them on the set today. You know, it's such a blessing to have been in the Nation of Islam for over a quarter of a century, and to have the young people come up behind us. So, you know, that's like the grand achievement, to be able to see the next generation starting to follow in your footprints, I guess, or in your path. And so it's such a blessing to have them on the set and to have their youthful perspective. Not that it's not wise, because we have to say that, you know, some of the most profound things comes out the mouths of babes, as the scripture says. So we're very, very thankful for having them on the set to deal with such lofty concepts, such as the supreme wisdom. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that in the future, that our babies will one day open the lessons of the problem book and say that's what that meant. And I believe that this is the time that we're in. So last week, just going back to last week, we had a wonderful conversation, and we were dealing with the destruction of the American education system. And as we ended off the broadcast, Sister Gabrielle was like, that would be a wonderful subject to begin with next week. And so what we did is that we did a little word substitution, and we substituted in one of the readings that we had from Our Savior Has Arrived. That's the book that we were reading out of. And we substituted the word God with the word scientist, because we had looked at a clip of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad from one of the table talks, when he said that no one would have thought that he would be a scientist who would be teaching the world. So we know that we can substitute the word scientist for the word God, because they're one and the same. And then we looked at problem number 13, and we know that there's a word substitution for Islam and for mathematics. And so as we were ending out, we stopped on the note that this supreme wisdom curriculum framework is actually a science-based curriculum. And so today, what we're going to deal with is the whole concept of that the supreme wisdom is the real STEM education. So we're looking at, this is episode number 9009, and we're looking at the topic of the supreme wisdom as the real STEM education. So what we're going to do, of course, we always like to start off with a clip from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, or someone that is bringing more light to the subject, and then we go off in our conversation after that. But let's go ahead and clear the word. For those who may not be familiar with what STEM is actually an acronym, and it's STEM. And there are certain derivations of the word in the educational world now, but we just want to stick with STEM. And so STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so STEM is a curriculum based on the idea that educating students in 4 specific disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is an interdisciplinary and applied approach. So what we want to look at is, one, the Supreme Wisdom curriculum framework as a STEM or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics-based curriculum. And what we want to do is that we want to elucidate a particular point, how that the science has to be married with the spirit. And that's what's different from this world's education, is that the materialists say that science is devoid of spirit. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start off with a short 5-minute clip from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and he is speaking on the scientific study of the Supreme Wisdom lessons. And what's so interesting about this is that when we started off this podcast, we started off with a lecture that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did in 2008 with the educational conference called Education and Land, a Blueprint for a New World. Now we're going all the way back to 1972, where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is discussing the scientific study of the Supreme Wisdom. So let's go ahead and jump off into this right quick. Please, we would like to hear your comments, any questions that you might have in the comment or chat section. Share it with a friend. We would love to have you join us. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So give us just a second, and we will be playing the clip from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And here we go. We were told that the sound was not playing, so we're going to replay it. Okay, well, it says that it looks like we don't have any sound. So, Sister Gabrielle, if you could come off mute, so that way we can see whether or not we have sound. So let me try playing it again. So do we have sound now?
No, ma'am. We still don't have sound.
Okay.
I see your YouTube feed is okay. It just said it was muted, but I see you took it off.
Okay, yeah, I muted that one, but let's see, because I have two playing and I don't want both of them playing at the same time. That's my live. So
Okay.
what we want to do is that we want to have the video play, but I can hear it on this side. So tell me if we have sound now.
No, ma'am. No sound.
Well, not yet.
Oh.
Now do we have sound?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Well, that's okay. We could just go ahead and keep it moving. We don't have to stop at this point. So let's go ahead and get started with our conversation. We lost Sister Demoiselle. She'll be back on with us in just a second. Well, anyway, that particular clip, Sister Gabrielle knows it, and perhaps we can put the link to the video in the description box so you can make sure that you listen to it. So this video is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1972 talking about studying your lessons. And there's this one particular brother, I forget his name, he spoke in Chicago one day, and it was probably like in the 90s. And he used to be a student minister of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but he came in under Minister Farrakhan. And he talks about how that he had studied his lessons, and that, you know, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan asked them, well, did he know his lessons? And so he basically told him that you need to keep on studying them. This is like in the 60s. So in the 70s, this is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in 1972 saying that we need to know our lessons. We need to study our lessons. He said we need to understand. He said you're in a classroom and you don't even understand, you know, whose classroom that you're in. You don't even know your teacher. And so with that being said, the importance of the supreme wisdom just cannot be overemphasized, because this is what God came to give us. He came to give us our own, and he came to give us the beginnings of a new world. If we look at the world, and just for the record, if we look at the world that we live in, we're on the precipice of who knows what's going to happen after Tuesday. I mean, really, it could be business as usual, but 2020 has most definitely been a very interesting year, to say the least, a very interesting year. So with that being said, now, if we clearly see this world going out, if not just completely going out, we see aspects of it that are dying, you know, at this point, a very fast death. So we see all of the systems starting to crumble. We see all of the I mean, morals and morality is out the window. Our leadership is I, words just really can't express my sentiment about the type of leadership that this world has. I'm not just talking about America, it's everywhere. Donald Trump is really just a, he's just really showing us, magnifying what had already been there. And so, with that being said, we have to be prepared as a people for what is coming in. And so something has to come in after this. And so God has already set it up. It's already been ordained for us to move into a new world, to transition into a new world. And so we have been talking here on the New World Education. How does this happen? How does this transition take place? And through what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us is through a new education. Is Master Farrakhan Muhammad came to put a new mind in us. And the words that we have that he's left for us are contained within the Supreme Wisdom Lessons. These are direct communications from Master Farrakhan Muhammad and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad to us. And so, what did he leave us? Did he just leave us a book of questions and answers? He left us a blueprint to build a brand new world. And so, in order to do that, just like with any discipline, you have to go to school. And that's what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was saying on that video clip, is that we have to, once we came into the Nation of Islam, we enrolled in this new educational institution. And so with that being said, now we must learn our lesson. So as I said last week, we talked about the whole concept of this being a science-based curriculum, because he said that he would give us the knowledge of gods, and gods are also scientists, and not the knowledge of the prophets of the gods. So that's what we want to talk about today. And we would love to have you join us in our conversation as we talk about the supreme wisdom, the real STEM education. So Sister Gabrielle, you came up in college with a STEM degree. So, and you also came up in college with a STEM degree, the real STEM degree. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start off with you as we wait for Sister Demoiselle to join us. Start off with you, and let's talk about the real STEM education. Well, you can start off, how about this? Tell us about what is STEM education. Tell us about the idea of behind why STEM education is being pushed in this world.
Well, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I don't think I ever introduced myself saying assalamu alaikum before, but I need to start doing that now. But yes, in STEM education, at this point, it's not new. So that concept is not new. People are very familiar with STEM education, as you said. It was an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so the reason that STEM education is being pushed is because that's where the future is going. The future is technology. And as we can see, even in my short lifetime, I'm not even 30 yet, and technology has jumped so far, where when I was young, I was playing video games with cartridges in 8-bit graphics, and now I'm able to play video games on Blu-ray, disc and things like that. And cell phones went from being, well, when I was around, cell phones were not big, but the technology in cell phones changed. And I remember my first cell phone, the only game you could play on it was Snake, and some other games like that. And then when texting really became a thing, that was big. And now you can watch videos on your phone, take pictures on your phone check your email on your phone. You can do anything on your phone that you can do on a computer, but in the palm of your hand. And so that is really the reason for STEM technology being pushed in schools, because the in this sense in America, but in the world leaders saw the future being technology. So they wanted to bring up the next generation to be those people who not only use technology, but develop technology. And so that's where your science, engineering, technology, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education comes in.
Right.
But really, a little bit more when I graduated from college. I actually participated as a junior physicist in a STEM teacher development program. It was basically a summer program where we taught STEM teachers how to teach their students STEM. And so the emphasis of this program was actually critical thinking and problem solving. And that's really what they wanted in inquiry-based learning. And so they wanted to teach teachers that when you're trying to teach your students STEM, you shouldn't just get in front of them and give them facts and then have you recite it back to them. But they decided that the best way to teach STEM was to let children experiment.
Right.
And to engage. And so when we're dealing with inquiry, we're dealing with questioning. So they wanted students to have experiences and then ask questions. And then from asking questions to critically think and problem solve to be able to come up with solutions. And so this is basically a watered down version or in a baby bottle, the scientific method that a lot of us are familiar with. Once we get into a little bit older, higher grades, they start teaching you the scientific method where you start off with a hypothesis, then you set up an experiment, and then you perform your experiment with certain controlled variables, certain dependent and independent variables, and you change each one to see how it affects it. And then when you collect all this data, after you observe, you record the data, and then you analyze the data. And then after you analyze the data, you come to a conclusion. And so in your conclusion is going to answer the question that your hypothesis set out in the initial experiment. So is your hypothesis correct, yes or no? And so this is how the focus of their program that I was involved in was to teach teachers how to teach their students in this way, because what was found is that a lot of teachers were not teaching their students science, from questioning. They was just, telling their students things. And so this was the new way that they were trying to bring in. So that is the STEM education. That's really the basis of the emphasis of the STEM education, because again, that same problem solving paradigm can be used outside of STEM, outside of science, technology, engineering, mathematics. This can also be used, in English. This can also be used when you're dealing with language. Any question that you set out to ask, you can set up an experiment or set up some type of observation where you can pinpoint what it is that you're trying to find out.
Okay, excellent explanation. That's wonderful that you shared with us that you have an expertise, if you will, or at least very familiar with not just being a student in a STEM discipline, but also from the education or the teacher side, the pedagogy of real scientific teaching and learning. So I want to go ahead and welcome back, Sister Gabrielle. We're glad to see you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We lost you for a minute there. Okay, praise be to Allah. We've had a couple of technical difficulties this time, but it's going to be all right, as they say. It's 2020. Blame it on 2020. Everything is because of 2020.
Blame it on the mystery God.
Yeah, on the mystery God. I look for that mystery God.
Look, this that technology you talking about, this malfunctioning.
That's right. See, if we were working on the high technology, using real modern equipment, using our brain power, we wouldn't even have to have this. We could just send this information out to the atmosphere and people will pick up on it. We can bypass the whole.
We can plug in our devices and make sure they're charged. So using the law of cause and effect, we troubleshoot and found out
This
that
is true.
the
This
battery
is true.
died.
That the battery died. Yes, we can't blame it on the enemy for this one. Okay, praise be to Allah. So now let's deal with the Sister Damazelle, just catch up to speed. Sister Gabrielle, we had technical difficulties through the whole video. Okay, so the video, no sound came across, so we're going to put it in the chat box. If you could go ahead and put that video in the chat box or in the description box. And that was the scientific study of the Supreme Wisdom Lessons by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, so that those who are viewing can be able to see it. But Sister Gabrielle was sharing with us, he talked about her experience with a STEM education in school because she got a degree in the STEM discipline. But then she also had a STEM education, the real STEM education, which is the Supreme Wisdom curriculum education. So let's, if we can, I want you to, kind of share, because as I said, spoiler alert, if we look a little similar, it's not by accident. This is my child. And so these are my children, but this particular child was a student basically from, elementary on up to college. She was with me. And so when she went to college, I know it sounds very strange.
Hold on, wait, are you talking about?
She's talking about you.
I'm talking about you.
Okay. Yes, I was with her. I was
you were
in
with
public
me.
school. A portion.
In 9th grade, you went to school with me. When I was in college, you came with me, remember? Every day. You probably just blanked out, probably checked out.
See, that's what I was saying. I didn't know who you were talking about.
You don't remember. Okay, that's okay. We do what we have to. Nonetheless, what happened is that it sounds a little bit arrogant. And I'm not sure if it is or if it isn't. You can, judge for yourself. But when Sister Gabrielle went to college, she was like, these teachers really can't teach me anything.
You sure did.
She did. She said, I had Supreme Wisdom. She said, they're really not teaching me anything. And so, of course, that sounds arrogant. But
at the qualifier, it definitely was arrogant. I was 18. So, yes, I've matured since then. So
praise be to Allah.
I've learned humility and to be able to learn from anybody or at least take away what's valuable. But
yes.
When I went in, I definitely was arrogant. But it still was true. But yeah.
And that's the quagmire that we have here. And it's such a touchy situation when you are teaching a person, a human being, that they are God. You have to do that in such a careful way. That's why the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he talked about that he would never teach another like he taught Malcolm, because it can produce, just like medicines, when they make it for one particular ailment, it produces side effects. So an education like this in a world that we live in can perhaps produce a side effect. But the point is that the reality of it is that people that come up under this type of educational paradigm, you're going to produce something different in them than you would produce in, a system that is really diametrically opposed to your rise. And so it's going to produce a certain amount of self-respect. Is going to produce a certain amount of confidence. And so, especially when you're dealing with science and mathematics, those things are very logical and straightforward. So when you present the facts, and maybe the people or the person that you're presenting to may be going off of the emotions as opposed to facts, it can seem like or come off as maybe even, arrogant or a know-it-all. But God is a know-it-all. He is the best knower.
I just want to make this qualifier. I had never told any of my professors that. That was something that I would say when I would come back home and just reflect on my day. It's just come from school and your parents say, "What did you learn today?" You're like, "Oh,
Nothing.
because I
And
already
they
knew
were telling the
everything."
truth.
But
Yes.
I didn't go around telling people that, but it
Yeah,
definitely was
I
on
know.
my mind.
I know. I get the point. And it's just that the way of thinking is different. The if you will, I'm gonna go to a science, computer science based, the algorithms. The brain actually can process information, the input and output, in a lot of cases doesn't have, an improper code written in it. So you're able to put something in and get the right, output, technologically, in children that have been brought up under a certain type of educational framework. Well, going back to what we're saying, this education, this supreme wisdom, educational framework in terms of science, a science-based education. What was your experience, Sister Gabrielle, as it relates to um, the real STEM education that you received?
Well, I really can, because I feel like I didn't get any special treatment. It was just what it was at MUI. I went to MUI in Baton Rouge, and um, we would start, of course, our day in the beginning with prayer, pledge, devotion, drill. Then after that, we would break out into our different grade levels and go to our classes. But we always began our days with Islamic studies. And so with Islamic studies, we would read from the Message of Black Man, Fall of America, Torchlight, all of the Nation of Islam books, Supreme Wisdom. Um, and not even Supreme Wisdom so much. The main book that I remember spending a lot of time on was Message to the Black Man. And we would just, it was only supposed to be, like an hour or 50-minute class. But when we would get into the topic, Sister Deborah, because she was my teacher, she was the teacher of the older students. And, she would start the day with a reading and a question. And then through that reading and that question, that really would set the tone for the rest of the day. And the way she did it is that wherever the spirit of the class took us, because everybody was asking questions, and so we would just discuss that topic until we completely exhausted it. And then whenever we would finish, we would move on to our next subject. But the beautiful thing of it is that a lot of times whenever we would discuss a topic in the Message of Black Man or Supreme Wisdom or wherever we were reading from and discussing about, we really would cut across all the disciplines. So even though when you think of school, you think of it, as 50 minutes per subject, and you get all your subjects during the day in a totally different class. So you would go over, you might start today with math, 50 minutes, take a break, go to the next class, English, 50 minutes, take a break, and so on and so forth. And all of those classes were distinct and different from each other and taught in a totally separate ways, a totally separate mindset. So a lot of times, some students can experience, that shell shock of having to be like totally focused when you're taking a course like math and then and then switching to English, where it takes a totally different type of thinking and type of thought process to do this. But in MUI, really, that first class really set the tone. And once we finished, the rest of the day was self-guided. We really never, I'm not gonna say never, but for the most part, once we broke out into our other subjects, we were all kind of self-contained. We would have our individualized instruction, and we were allowed to move at our own pace. And if you needed, because we already knew how to read, that's really the fundamental thing. And so after we knew how to read, we could just take the book and read the instructions in the book and just follow along in the book. So we were given really, this is really revolutionary, because if I could teach students like that, I would definitely do it. But in the public school system, this is the issue that they have when they have these large number of classrooms, a large number of students in the classroom. They really can't serve the individual needs of the student. And so with our class, not only was it many students and only one teacher, but it was many different grade levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so how that was handled is that she would and not even within the grade levels, we were all allowed to move at our own pace. We were given the syllabus for the week, and then we could work throughout finish as much work as we would like, really during the day. And then if you finished all of your work the rest of the time, you had free time so you could do not whatever you want, but of course whatever you want in the bounds of what's allowed at school. So you can, if you have free time, you can do a puzzle, you can draw, you can read, you can just read some more. And if whatever we talked about at the beginning of the day was interesting to you, you can go back and finish reading that passage, read the final call. You can, but as long as you didn't disturb all the other students. But we were so motivated and driven to, to succeed and do our work and do it well, that we really didn't need a lot of lecturing, because we really got the most time where we got the lecture was during Islamic studies. And even in that lecture, after she would throw the question out, she would just guide the discussion. And and so so for the rest of the class, it was really just us working in silence. For the rest of the school day, it was us working in silence. And so I on its face, you can say, oh, well, that's not extraordinary. That's not a lot. But now that I'm older, and by the time that I got to college, I already had those skills that you need to succeed in college, to be self-disciplined, self-motivated, because again, that's what they like to say, when you get to college, nobody's going to hold your hand anymore. So you're going to need to be able to complete your work. The professor, if you don't get it during the time that the professor goes over it in class, it's on you to teach yourself, or even to reach out to the professor or whatever. And so that helped me. That's why I always say that college was easy. Like I literally, I was in college making 100% on exams with little study, because I didn't study. I would just come to class. I wouldn't get distracted. I'd sit there, give my complete attention. And then in between classes, I would do my work. And then by the time I got home, I had the rest of the time free. And even now in law school, that's another thing. In law school, they give you this kind of speech at the beginning of law school, like, this is going to be different from any type of education that you ever had, because you used to everybody telling you everything, and they introduce you to this Socratic method of learning. And again, because I was given that quality education early on, I was already used to the style of teaching, where the teacher facilitates in the discussions are question driven by the student, and is looking for the students to think deeply. And even you're really responsible for teaching yourself, because you're not trying to learn or memorize the laws, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to learn this way of problem solving, where you can have any law, you can take the rule and just apply it to the facts. And so again, this supreme wisdom educational paradigm is a universal education, because I've even gone to China, and when I had to learn Chinese, I was the top student, and I picked it up very easily because of the mindset and the methodology that we were taught and raised on.
Okay, praise be to Allah. That you said one thing that was key, I believe, and that was problem solving. And that is the basis of what I believe that the supreme wisdom is built upon: solving problems. And the biggest problem that we have had is the problem of self, not understanding self, not knowing self, not understanding our own. And so we've had to solve the problem and of dealing with self. Now, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad talks about that there's life on all of the planets, and 7 of them are inhabited. And he said, but the most intelligent life is on the earth, because of the level of experimentation that the earth or the Asiatic people do. And that level of experimentation, of course, is the reason why we don't live so long, because we do things that are experimenting on ourselves. But that is the problem. that exists. It's the problem in self. And so this supreme wisdom educational construct, which is based and rooted in science, this is the same thing that the originator of the heaven and the earth was wrangling with when he self-created, was the issue of the weaker side of self. And so he went about scientifically and mathematically working on the problem of that weaker side of self, which the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad called it the brown germ. Now, when we deal with that from the beginning, I mean, everything in what Master Farrakhan Muhammad is based in science, rooted in science and mathematics. Mathematics is the language. And so before I go too far on that wise, what we want to talk about is how is this curriculum framework, how can we line it up with STEM? And this is the question that I think many people have, many of us have. How do you take such a small document and transpose it into not only a K-12 education, a post-secondary education, and it be universal? Now, what we said that we wanted to do was look at a question. And this question has to do with who was the founder of unlike attract and like repel. Now, if we think about that, that's setting up a scenario that is, when you begin to start extracting from it, you're going to find that it's interdisciplinary, that it is very high science. It's multidisciplinary as well as interdisciplinary. So the question is, who is the founder of unlike attract? Without going into the whole answer, we will say that this is an original man who was a scientist by the name of Yakub. Now, one, it says that he was a scientist. Two, he's talking about laws. And so in science, we have laws and we have theorems, we have axioms, and then we know about unlike attract and like repel. That's high science. And said that he was the founder of that law. So how do we take that and transpose or flip that question and answer into units and lesson plans? The first thing is that you have to examine it. You have to go deep into it and look what's there. I mean, it sounds like a very simple question and answer, but let's take a look at it. What is it really about? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I know you're getting into kind of not anything that can't be known, but this is what the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center provides courses on how to do just this.
Absolutely.
And so I just try to make sure that's where we're going.
Yes. That, I mean, but it's okay. Sometimes you have to, just go ahead and really show, what it is that we do, because this is a hard thing to do when you're thinking about a brand new paradigm, a brand new way of thinking, based upon something that we've had all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, why would you be willing to take a chance on something like this if you didn't know something about it? At least have some idea about how it works. Now, I've done workshops on this before, but it's okay. We could go into this. So what the first thing that we like to look at is what is there? So if we looked at this question, what are some of the subjects that are contained just within the question? Who was the founder of unlike, attract, and like, repel? So it's obvious, first of all, it is a question. So we can look at language. And so we can look at the different types of sentences. We can look at sentence structure. We can look at vocabulary, grammar. We can look at inferences. I mean, there's just so many things that we can look at just from the standpoint of linguistics. Now, going back to when you all were in school, every vocabulary word that you had, I know you're smiling because it seemed a little bit extreme at the time, but I think that it was beneficial in the long run. So every word that you all had as vocabulary, not only did you have to define it, you had to say what part of speech it was. You had to, of course, look at the etymology of the word and even when the word entered the English language. All of this is important, very important to understanding. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, or the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, talked about language, talked about the English language. This is the language that was used in our enslavement when the Bible was translated into English, and it was used to help enslave us. So we have to, in order to get out of being enslaved, we have to understand the usage of language in a scientific way. So even language is scientific. What is something else, Sister Gabrielle, just in the question that you see that's there in terms of, let's go with the STEM, because that's what we want to focus on now.
Right. And of course, the thing we're going to look at in STEM is unlike, attract, and like, repel. And so another way to say that is the law of magnetism. So that is the STEM takeaway. But also, like you said, the first thing you have to do is define the words, because even in defining the words, you can find more that might even be alluding to STEM. So when I'm looking at this one, it doesn't say the law, and specifically in this one, I'm not getting too specific.
Yes, ma'am.
But the word found. And so I remember in my study as an adult, actually, because I taught a lecture series on this, for foundation class.
Yes.
and I looked up the word found. And so again, as you were saying, in the study of language, the words change over time in the usage and in the commonplace. But another word for found has to do with blacksmith or
metallurgy.
Yeah, metallurgy. So a place where they work with metals and heating metals and reshaping and forming metals, called a foundry. Yeah, and so it's called a foundry. And so again, when you're dealing with magnetism, when we go to chemistry, you have the periodic table, and you have certain types of things on the periodic elements that are metallic, that are in the different it's a gas, it's a gas, it's a liquid, it's a solid, and with those solids you have metals, and then you have also other solids that are non-metallic, which are more brittle. And so we know the thing about just like we go through elementary science, then we look at the properties of an element. And so what are some distinct features about a metal? Is that it's malleable, it's ductile, it conducts electricity and heat. The appearance of it is shiny. So these are the even more into the lessons in also but we were dealing with like, attract, and unlike, attract, and like, repel. So a lot of these metallic properties are found in, not metallic, but magnetic properties are found in metals. And so when you're dealing with that magnetism is something that is found in metals, and also this word found that you can even dig
Mhm.
into. And that's also dealing with the shaping of metals. When you study Yakut's history, the actual metal that he dealt with was steel, which is
Mhm.
an alloy. So
Mhm.
it's a mixture of metals,
Mhm.
or it's a mixture of elements.
Mhm.
And it's a mixture of elements, and because of the, the different materials, it makes the product something that can be useful, that has different uses and purposes. So it I could go on forever on this one. And then that can bring you to history, and then you study the history of civilizations and
Mhm.
technology,
Mhm.
because again, like, even though all of it isn't true, but some of it you can take, and the rest of it that doesn't line up or square for what we're taught, you can leave. But
Mhm.
you have as human beings advanced over time and technology advanced, we went from using wood to using stone to using iron and bronze, and then later as
Mhm.
technology advanced and they started to learn the science behind metals and metallurgy and smithing, they were able to create weapons that were made out of a superior metal called steel. So
Mhm.
you're looking at the different histories of mankind, and how, again, technology developed over time. And even the messenger black man says, it was the white man began with steel, and even
Mhm.
to this day, he's still playing with steel to this day. In contemporary to the time that these lessons would have been written, that brings you to the Carnegie, who was an industry man who waxed rich off of steel.
He was
So
a
it's
steel magnate.
Yes, interesting.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was a steel magnate, and he is also one of these people that we looked at last week that
Mhm.
were the some of the instrumental in forming this present educational system that we have in America.
And when you graduate from high school, you have to have so many units of study, which they call them the Carnegie units.
Mm-hmm.
So Carnegie is actually very instrumental in the uh, the shaping of the American educational system.
Right.
So we just are on a question, and there's so much more. Sister Gabrielle talked about magnetism, and magnetism, or um, is one aspect of the law of attraction, or unlike attract and like repel. You could even go down to the atom and go to the subatomic particles, which you have the electrons and the protons. They're unlike. So that's, they have an attraction. And like, now when you get into this is what makes it real profound, because if you know anything about the lessons, and if you can put in context of the timeline, you can see there's so much in here that Master Farad Muhammad, when he came in and out of America from 1910 to 1920, and the people that he potentially came in contact with, which we believe that this is the case, that he was able to make contact with people, and they were able to get certain information that was going to be instrumental in a future time. For example, when we're dealing with the whole concept of um, where you have like things repel, when you go down to the subatomic particles, protons in a nucleus of an atom have a like charge. What happens is that like charges are supposed to repel. And so in order for the nucleus of in an atom to stay together, there has to be a strong force, because they talk about the four fundamental forces that exist in nature. And Einstein died trying to come up with a grand unified theory of all of these four forces. But inside the nucleus, it goes against, so that this particular law of unlike or alike repel. And so there's a strong force that holds this together. And so, of course, they're trying to go after the strong force. And you also have the electromagnetic force that exists. So magnetism is a part of the subatomic world. And so when we talk about Master Fard Muhammad and looking at him and what he brought in context of time, this was during the time of, as Sister Gabrielle has done extensive research, and I really would suggest that you all go back and look at, she dealt with 1914 World War I, all up into World War II, which something happened that changed the course of human history in World War II. With 1942? 1942? Well, we have atomic weapons. In our lessons, the Master Fard Muhammad alludes to not atomic weapons, but alludes to atoms and how that these forces, strong force within an atom can be divided, that can create tremendous amount of energy. And so when we talk about the cracking of an atom, that is in 1930, the scientific world was not there yet. And so just imagine, this man is talking about when really they had just come up, the Western world had just come up on the knowledge of atoms, not even in the, because they thought that the atom was the smallest unit of matter. And so, they're just Johnny come lately as it relates to understanding the quantum world and that exists inside of the atom. And so Master Fard Muhammad talked about the cracking of an atom. So that's how you know that this man was so far ahead of this world that we have. But think about it, and I'm going to let you come in here, Sister Gabrielle. But think about the whole concept. Sister Demoiselle is about to join us. The whole concept of understanding that there's potential energy inside of atoms. Everything in the universe consists of atoms. And you can take that energy that can be released from the dividing of this atom and give the whole world free energy. But instead of doing that, which would be the right intent for technology, you take that same technology and use that for destructive ends. That's the difference between the righteousness of God and the wickedness of Satan. That he would take something that is the most abundant resource in the universe, which is matter or atoms, and use it for destructive ends. Sister Gabrielle, it looked like you.
No. I was just.
So that's just
breathing.
One thing. You're just breathing. That's just one thing. Sister Demoiselle, we know that you've been in and out due to technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's rough. It's rough today.
It's rough. It's 2020.
Oh yeah.
I blame it all on 2020. And so anyway, the point is that now how do you look at something like that, that profound, and how would you take that and teach it to the babies? How would you take that and teach it to, somebody who's at the PhD level of education? It all can be done. The STEM education. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
But the how you would take that and teach it, because as I always do, cram and get overloaded for these podcasts. But
Right.
I was listening to a series of things, lectures from ministers in the Nation of Islam, and also listening to other scientific, historical references and things like that. And then the last thing I was listening to was basically a series on astronomy and the Bible, and how the Bible is astronomically coded. And going back to something that Sister Danny said, keep bringing up, that I said about how do you teach somebody who is of little understanding or little base knowledge something very complex. And so the example was you tell them in a condensed, broken down version in a language that they can understand and reference things that they are familiar with. And so what another word for that is called analogy. So an analogy, it means that when you're taking two things that are analogous, you're using them interchangeably. That is a mathematic. That's a mathematic concept. That's a mathematic tool, and that's what we do when we use algebra. When we use algebra, we take that which we know to find that which is unknown by using variables that are interchangeable. And so we will start off with a variable and line it up with what we know. And then we will start to move things back and forth until we come down to what is the value of that placeholder or that value, that variable. And so with the equation in English, you're saying that what's on this side is analogous to what is on this side. So what's on this side, you can use this in the place of what's on this side, and it will equal or mean the same thing. And so when we're talking about analogy, teaching using analogy, somebody might look when you're teaching using analogy and think that's simple, but that's actually very high level mathematics. And that's one way you can show your level of understanding by making analogies. And understanding analogies, that is a high level mathematical operation by being able to use analogy. And as a teacher, you can show your range by being able to make endless amount of analogies. You don't only have one analogy that you can use, because in order to use an analogy, you have to understand all of those references that you're using in an analogy. So if you're going to say that mathematics is Islam and Islam is mathematics, that means that you know a lot about Islam and you know a lot about mathematics, enough into a level of depth that you can see the analogy between the two.
Right.
And so when I say up is to down as left is to
right.
Exactly. And so, but I can make more. I can say night as is to day, as black as to
right.
Right. This is mathematics, but it's not the mathematics that we're used to with symbols of operation and characters that represent quantitative values. But this is a mathematical thinking, or this is what you call math logic. And that's another thing that we studied at MUI is we studied logic, mathematical logic, when we were able to perform math without values. But so we really understood what the operations themselves meant. And so when you understand things on the fundamental level, you can make those different permutations very easily, because you can see what other people can't see.
Yes.
Well, I was gonna say, like how you was saying earlier, how Sister Deborah taught when you were at the MUI. I would say that's one way of how you could do it, because if you look at the different subjects, if you will, as one one complete subject instead of broken up into different subjects, so it translates across anything that you deal with. So you can make those connections easily once you get older.
That's right.
You know, starting off as a younger person, a child, or anything like that.
That's true.
Because I would say just listening to how she was describing the way you taught in the MUI, I was thinking to myself, because even though I was going in and out, I still was able to hear the conversation, what was going on. That doesn't sound too much different from what we're doing now. Instead of reading, you will play a clip we would discuss it and wrangle with it, wherever it takes us across whatever field, And
That's
so,
it. That's it. Well, let me throw out this question. You're right on it, Demoiselle, and in terms of the methodology. And that's how Master Farah Muhammad taught. It was questions. Ask a question without expecting an answer. So when someone gave an answer, I'm sure that was an inroad into the mind of the student. So when I ask you a question then and I listen to your answer, I can kind of see what you think. I can see what perspective you have. And then that gives me an opportunity to get into what? Your thinking, your mind. And then we can walk together to the destination that we're trying to get to.
mm,
And so, yeah, absolutely. And then going back to that quote unquote Socratic method, then we can, as we're walking through your mind, we can point out certain things. Oh, did you see, the history here? Or did you see, this about geography here? Or did you look at the artistic part of this, question? So you, as the teacher, literally, that's what education means. That's what pedagogy means. If you go back to the root of the word pedagogy, what it was is that during the Greek time, the pedagogue, ped meaning foot, is the one who literally went and got the child and walked them to their teacher. The ped, meaning foot. And pedagogy, eventually what happened, the word changed and the function of the pedagogue changed to become the teacher that walks the student from where they start to where you want to take to the destination. And so literally a teacher has the ability, if they're scientific in their pedagogy, to walk the student exactly where you want them to go because you've already been there. So you take them along the path and you tell them, even that goes back to the true history of Jesus. We talked about this being a STEM education. Jesus, the wise man wanted to teach him a math lesson. So he sees some boys that are in the street that knew Jesus and asked him, go and ask about, where's this certain address? Well, Jesus was among them, according to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He says, oh, I know what this address is. So Jesus takes a walk with the wise man. Yes, he takes a walk with him. And so he's able to point out certain things that he wanted him to see. Yes. Pedagogue in the true sense of the
like
word.
Like
yes, in the true sense of the word.
That was fresh.
Praise be to Allah. So anyway, the point is that we're all serious and stuff today, but it's all good. But the point of the matter is that he taught him a math lesson. And and so back to what we're talking about, but then the wise man takes the lesson of mathematics. I don't know at what level, because there are 3 levels of mathematics, which that's what I want to deal with at the end, or going towards the end of our talk. But he takes math and uses it to teach him a very high spiritual principle, which the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said it was called the radio in the head, back to analogies. Mm-hmm. So we understand what a radio, at least we used to understand what a radio did. I don't know if we still understand the concept of radio technology now. But what happened is that you take electrical signals and you send them across what we call now, in this case, the airwaves. And so the signal travels from a sender and it goes to a receiver. And the receiver takes the electrical signal, decodes it, and it becomes sound at the point of the radio.
Right, and that's called communication. That's what all communication is, the same thing. A message is sent and then
A
that
medium.
message and then that message is received um, as sent, because the whole point of education, I mean not education, but the whole point of communication is to transmit my thought
Yes.
to you where you receive my thought as is. And so
Yes.
language or spoken language is only one form of communication, because if you can't hear, if you have the impediment of being deaf, or even if you're mute and you can't speak, there's certain things called sign language. So the whole thing in what makes communication possible is that both the sender and the receiver have the same foundation. If I can speak, if I can speak perfect English and I'm talking to somebody who only knows Chinese, there's sound that's being transmitted and received, but the understanding and the thought that the intention, the thought is not being reached because they don't have the same basis in the same language. Same thing, that's how radios work. It's that why when you change channels you hear different things. It's because you're tuning your reception to have to share the same frequency that the transmitter is putting out. So they have to be of the same essence in a sense.
Coherence.
Yes.
Were you going to say something else before? I mean, you wanted to make that comment? Because it looked like you were looking something up. Yes, Sister Gabrielle.
I was just trying to find in my notes the true history of Jesus so I can follow along with what you were saying.
Oh, okay. Sister Jamezel, did you want to make a comment before we kind of moved forward?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay, praise be to Allah. Well, back to what we're saying about the STEM technology, the science and mathematics, engineering, and technology. Supreme wisdom, I'm telling you, we sleeping on it, as they say. We are totally asleep. And when the messenger talked about a wake-up message, that's real. This is a this is
I'll say,
something
well,
that wake up.
it's the receiver's not not working properly. I think the antenna's broken or something.
What happened to your iPad?
What you mean? What happened to it?
It died.
It didn't have a connection.
So we couldn't get nothing
right.
out.
And so that's what's going on with us. Is trying to send a message to something that's dead. It's kind of hard to.
Yeah. That's right. Why it's necessary to resurrect the dead before you can start teaching.
Come on now.
Can't talk to the dead man. You gotta make him alive somehow. Then
you gotta wake him up first. You gotta get him up. Yeah. And so this is a wake-up message. And so when I say we're sleeping on the supreme wisdom, we're looking for everything except what is in our face. I'm telling you, how smart can you get if you study this thing? We're just on one question answer, and I, personally, I go way deeper than that. But that's just on scraping the surface. Now, how do you take that and you transpose that into lessons? For example.
Can I
yes, ma'am.
I'm just gonna, because this is nothing else doing. A lot of times you see me making all these moves and moving around because I'm pulling sources either from my computer or books or things like that.
Okay.
So many things that are being popped up, but I'm gonna share my screen. And it's not anything special. Allow me to share the screen.
You have a Sister Jameson?
No.
I got you.
Screen.
You got it?
I'm still disabled.
You got it?
Still disabled.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, this should be.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay,
there we go.
You got it?
I have it. So, can you all see my screen?
Not yet. It's coming up. We see it.
Oh, you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for telling me. But what I have here is a picture of a lesson plan. So this is what I was saying with, when I started school, yes, I was arrogant, but because I was able to humble myself, I was able to take away, something that is useful. But here is a template of a lesson plan. And so if you're not a teacher, this document might intimidate you, but really this is actually it helps teachers be able to simplify things. This is actually a very simple thing, and it's a framework where you can just drop in whatever it is that and when you finish filling this out, you will have a look at what you would be doing during that lesson. So first thing, of course, you put your name. And so here for your grade level, you would, put in whatever grade level. So if you're doing first grade versus 12th grade, you will put that in there. And so that will let you know what difficulty level or so that you're dealing with. And so with the subject matter. So with that question, when we're dealing with who is the founder of unlike, attract, and like repel. So for right here, you can put in physics.
Right.
Physics, right? And so you can say, what type of lesson is this going to be? Is this going to be a experimental lesson? Is it going to be a lab, or is it going to be a lecture? So you can put lab, right? Because now you're not going to really be teaching the students, but you're going to be allowing them to lecture. So this CC, SS, GLE, NGSS, this is where you would put your standard. And so all a standard is it tells you what level or what should the student be able to do, what type of what is the expectation. In Louisiana, we have what is called GLEs, which is grade level expectation. So say, for instance, when you're dealing with this topic of unlike, attract, and like repel. And so for the grade level expectancy or the standard, you wanted to match what grade level that you had. You wanted to match or be, on the level that the grade is. So if this is 12th grade, what should the student be able to do in regards to this lesson, or what should the student know regards to this lesson? So you might say, the student will be able to, and you would say whatever task of proficiency that you want them to be at. So with a 12th grade student, the lesson shouldn't simply be the student will be able to recite the law of opposite attract and like repel, because this is a 12th grade level and a more advanced level. The student should be able to do something that's more rigorous and advanced with that subject. And so give me something that a 12th grade student should know or be able to do with this lesson, with this topic.
Unlike attract, I would say that they can use the lead filings to create a field, a magnetic field, and show how just create a magnetic.
Yeah, create. And so create, we just gonna stop right there, because now it's to create, and that's your verb that you would take from your Bloom's taxonomy, and you would apply it to whatever this learning outcome is. And so by the time they're at upper levels with the Bloom taxonomy and the hierarchy of learning, at the lowest level, when you're at a younger age, you might say a student will be able to take the lead filings and name or recite or identify
the parts of an atom or something.
Yes, but with the 12th grade student, the processes that are using are of a higher magnitude, so they should be able to create. They should be able to reconstruct. They should be able to these higher level order thinking skills. And so here, I'm not going to fill the complete thing out, but this is the basis of how you use a lesson plan, and you can differentiate the level of engagement and rigor for whatever grade level or whatever age group you're dealing with. And so for materials, you would put down what materials are necessary. Since you're in this case dealing with lead filings, you're going to need some lead filings, and then you're going to
need some magnets.
You're going to need magnets. You know, you're going to need, and so whatever resources that you need to provide this lab experience, you're going to just put it down in the resources. If there's a worksheet to go along with it that's going to guide them, you would put that in there. Or if there's a video or a book or whatever it is that you want, they need to be able to complete this, you would put it in resources. And so the lesson objective is really just taking that standard and then breaking it down into, again, what the student is going to do by the end of this lesson. So if at the end of the lesson, they're going to write a lab report from this experiment, you would say the student will conduct said experiment. The student will complete a lab report. The student will present on their experiment, present on their findings in front of the class. That's what your objectives is going to come from your standards. And it's going to be, again, you're going to just map out exactly what the student is going to do in that class. Your anticipatory set is going to tell you how you as the teacher how you are going to start the class, how you're going to begin the class. And the opposite of the anticipatory set is the closure, which is how you're going to end the class.
Right.
And so, and in between, you have modeling, is you're going to say what you as a teacher are going to do. I'm going to explain magnetic fields. You know, that's what modeling is. I will on a chalkboard, on a whiteboard, on a projector, via PowerPoint, whatever. And so so again, how would you take this and put it in a baby bottle? This is a tool that, you know, we get from mainstream education that is an effective tool, and we can just use the framework of it and then just drop in the substance, you know, from the lessons. It's not a hard thing to do, but again, that background in education and going through that those courses and receiving that degree and learning these different methods, which is the same thing that we offer.
Right. And we have a little twist on it, though. We have a little twist. Now, what you're seeing is what we have learned in our methods classes and our but with what we teach at the Supreme Wisdom Educational Center, we teach how to use thematic units, where you would take it and you would make it a theme that will go across not just the subject matters, but it would go across or be scaffolded across the grade. We really don't use grades, which are age-based groupings. What we use is levels, which are competency groupings. And so each level will have the same theme, but the gradient of vocabulary and work will be on that level of the student. So everybody starts off at the same level and has to go through the lesson, has to progress through the lesson until they get to the point of mastery. So anyway, exactly. Thank you, Sister Gabrielle, for sharing that with us. Sister Demoiselle, do you have anything before we move forward?
No, ma'am.
Okay, now in this last 30 minutes, now we hopefully have demonstrated without going too far how the lessons that we were given by Master Farrakhan Muhammad are the real STEM education. Now, for those of us who are in the nation that have our lessons, I would suggest that we get them dust them off.
Get, get the dust off.
Reprint. Bind.
Yes. And begin again looking at the lessons with a renewed perspective as an educational paradigm. We're looking for something new, it's right in our face. And we would be surprised, fascinated, elated at what we find. I mean, there are times when personally, I can sit down with these lessons and I can go 12 hours and just am glued because it's going to take you from this point all the way to the far planet Pluto and back because it's so much in it and it's so interconnected. You know, talking about teaching across the curriculum. Oh my God. I mean, I'm telling you, we got to stop sleeping on these lessons. But the question is, if the gods are scientists and we're being taught, Master Farrakhan Muhammad came to make us into himself, which is a God, word substitution is a scientist, and he wants us to practice our Islam, you know, to practice this as a way of life until it becomes, you know, our way of life. But it's mathematics. That's the expression that we use. That's the language that we use as scientists. Okay. Why didn't Master Farrakhan Muhammad just go straight at it and tell us, I'm going to make you all into scientists. These scientists are going to be so powerful that they're going to rule the world. Why didn't he just say that? I'm just seemed like that would have been easier to accept than God.
The same reason why the lesson we're supposed to learn in the making of devil, because that's what the Lost Brown Muslim lesson number 2 ends. You know, why after you learn about the making of devil and all the bad things the devil has done, you ask, then the question is asked, why did he make devil if the devil really didn't produce anything or do anything good? And so this is my personal opinion, and from studying just that question, trying to go after that question, is the devil is, you know, he's an example, and he shows us what we would be if we are given power unchecked by character and morals, and you know, and restricted by the restrictive law. He is power unbound, unbridled, as the minister would like to say. And when you have that much power and no check on that power, it creates chaos and tyranny and a host of other, you know, negative things. And something that, as like I was listening to Brother Abdullah making an analogy, he was saying that, you know, water is something that everything that's alive needs to stay alive. But, you know, when that water flows, it's good for you. But if you drink water out of a standing body of water, you know, it can be poisonous to you, because standing water is a breeding ground for bacteria and things that are not good for you.
Right.
And so the same thing with power. Power is something that you need to do work. It's something that you need to.
It's connected to work.
Yes, like Sister Denzel was saying, when that power in her iPad went out, her iPad could not function. It could not make any motion. It could not do the work. It could not, you know, do what it was made to do. But at the same time, you know, if that power is not controlled via, because, you know, that's why your cords are made a certain way, so it won't overload.
Protection.
Yes. So because it protects the actual thing that it's supposed to charge without overloading it and killing it and ultimately destroying it. And so it's the same thing. The devil was made for us to see, you know, what we don't want to be. And so, and because that's before there was even devil, there was the god of the moon, who, you know, wished, because he couldn't have his way, he thought it was just better to kill everybody. That's a condensed version, but we're not gonna get into that. But that's the same thing. So that's why Master Farrakhan Muhammad, and again, the physical and mental power of the original man is even greater than the graphic. And so just imagine power, in unchecked in a superior in a superior person that uses the power. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So going back to potential, we have more potential to do more damage.
Sister Jameson?
Well, we have a fail safe too, so that's why we still here. Well,
Yes.
you said why would he just not say scientists instead of God? Well, I think one, if you come into people, not saying with everybody, but people who really don't have, in terms of the masses in education, and you talking about being a scientist, I don't think that they, we collective would have probably accepted that more so than being steeped in religion. Then you telling us that we're God. So I think that's why he came and said, instead of being scientists, because education
1930.
as we know it to be, I don't think we would have accepted it as much. You telling us we're scientists when I'm just coming up out of sharecropping and all that. So I'm like, I'm not a scientist. I didn't even go to school. So what are you talking about? I'm a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm in the church, and you're telling me that this one is not God, but I'm God. So you mean all my life I've been told something else when I'm really God, not the devil? So I think that's why, again, it goes back to that communication, the certain technology. We talking about STEM. So STEM, technology is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to use the right message to transmit for us to receive, to be able to accept, and not necessarily just accept, but be able to start functioning properly, I would say.
Yeah.
So that's why I, on another note, would say why he would use, or why I think he would use God instead of scientists.
Okay. You have anything else to ask, Sister Gabrielle?
No.
No? Okay. Well, this brings me to my point about the whole concept of the interchanging between the word God and scientists. Now, think about it from this standpoint. When the scientists of this world began to start, because let me clear this up. Sister Gabrielle, what you were saying is that science and the knowledge of science can give you power, right? And that in the hands of someone who is undeveloped is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And Sister Jane Mazel, you on the other hand, was saying that Black people in 1930 had Master Farrakhan Muhammad brings a psychology to reorient the mind, to see oneself in a different light, to see oneself as divine.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about, Sister Gabrielle's talking about science and power. And what you're talking about is that spirit and power. The knowledge of God itself gave us, through the spiritual side, gave us power to get up from the condition that we were in. Masterful psychology. Masterful psychology. My question was, because we talk about the law of cause and effect, they say that 85% don't know the law of cause and effect, but the total the 10 and the 5 know the law of cause and effect. One of them know about the true and living God, Sister Demoiselle, and well, both of them do. But one of them teaches the 85% that God is a mystery.
Right.
And the 5% teach, the poor righteous teachers that try to teach the 85% the knowledge of God. Now, I want to go here and perhaps look, I'm going to share my screen and perhaps look at this from this standpoint. That if Master Fard Muhammad, this is my supposition, if Master Fard Muhammad, from that legal standpoint, Master Fard Muhammad, if he would have just gone after giving us the science of the supreme wisdom instead of giving us the spirit, he would have, like Sister Gabrielle alluded to, produced perhaps what happened with the enemy or Western science, let me say like that. Now, I'm going to share my screen here, and I want to deal with two things as we close out. And let me see. The first one, and just let me know when you all can see my screen. Are we there? Okay. The first one, I want to deal with the whole concept of materialists. The scientists of this world, especially during that time of the late 1800s into the 1900s, really started pushing the concept of a materialist perspective. So what is a materialist? The materialist, by definition, is a person who considers material possessions and physical comfort as more important than spiritual values. This is how we could get people that they called the industrialists, the robber barons, all of these people. They saw that as more important. A person in philosophy, it says a person who supports the theory that nothing exists except matter and its movement and modifications. Now, some of your materialist philosophers, they say, and I just want to point out Karl Marx. We know that in terms of communism, that Karl Marx was somebody who was in that time period that we can say that led up to Master Fard Muhammad and his coming and the world that was changing from a world that dealt with the spiritual side to a world that was dealing with the materialistic side of life. Now here, I just want to read this little definition that they have in Wikipedia, which is not the best scholarly resource, but it'll do for this point. And it says, materialism is a form, ma'am?
To your screen.
You can't?
I can see it.
You must have pulled, I think you pulled up a different,
No, I just went down.
Oh, you're reading it off? Okay, I see it.
Okay, yeah, I'm just reading. So materialism is a form of a philosophical monism that holds that matter is the fundamental substance of nature, and that all things, including mental states, consciousness, are a result of material interaction. So they're saying that everything is based on the physical. Now, that's out of all that they learned, out of all that science could see, this is what a materialist could come up with. Now, I want to come to, I'm going to go here, and this is where we're going to kind of end off. There is a conference that was held in 1927 in Brussels, and it was called the International Solvay Institute for Physics and Chemistry. And at this particular conference, they had 3 of them, but I want to deal with the 1927 conference. And this 1927 conference, these men that we see on the screen, if we could see them. These are some of the men that in this particular time of science and science exploration are like the gods, if you will, because we said scientists and gods can be used interchangeably,
Mhm.
of modern science, physics, quantum physics. And so it says here at the fifth conference, it says perhaps the most famous conference was the fifth Solvay conference on electrons and photons, held from the 24th to the 29th of October, 1927, where the world's most notable physicists met to discuss the newly formed, quantum theory. Leading figures were Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. 17 of these 29 attendees became Nobel Prize winners, including Maria Curie, who, along among them, had won Nobel Prizes in two separate scientific disciplines. Now, I'm putting this in context. Master Fard Muhammad came in and out of America from 1910 and 1920. He traveled all over the world, okay, meeting people, probably planting seeds of different things. He condenses all of that, his travels and his studies, down into what we know as the supreme wisdom. Now, at this fifth Solvay conference, when they were dealing with electrons and photons, electrons, subatomic particles that exist inside the atom, that move in orbits around the nucleus, right? And photons, which are packets of light. From this study of the atom, understanding the emission of light from electrons moving from one orbit to another, it emits these photons. They found out something very interesting. That, and just to break it down and just bring it in, I would really suggest that those who are watching look at this. They found, after believing that the world was, or after propagating that the world was based on materialism or a materialistic worldview, they had to come to the conclusion through this research that there was something else that underlied the physical reality, and that was consciousness. And Albert Einstein, the most notable, because that's the one that most people know, laypersons know, he realized that there was something else. He said that God didn't do a crapshoot. It wasn't something that was a luck of the draw, so to speak, that this universe was created. He realized that there had to be something that ordered this universe. And they also were able to understand through studying light that light is a photon, and it also propagates as a wave. And they found out through what's called the double slit experiment. And I'm saying all of this to say, I know it sounds like a lot of science, but it's all in the lessons. That once the person who's performing the experiment observes the experiment, the very observation of the person observing this experiment changes the outcome of the actual experiment. And they kept on doing this over and over again and realized that something else was at play, something that they could not, quantify. And so when you look at the fact that Master Fard Muhammad came telling us that we were gods. But later we understood that it was interchanged with the word scientist in order to be able to properly use the power that is contained within what he gave us. We must first start with God. That's the starting point. We can't start with science from a materialistic point of view. That's why we can have as many science degrees stacked up on each other all the way to the moon, and it will serve us no good. We can't get to the hereafter. We can't get to the real heaven trying to do it in that manner. You have Elon Musk, which I'm very fascinated with him at this particular time. However, Elon Musk is trying to build a colony on Mars. I guess in his mind, he's trying to create heaven, on Mars for those who can afford to go to Mars. They'll never have it because they're starting at the wrong point. The starting point is with God, and the ending point is with God. And the way that God has to exercise his or her power has to be just like what in the Quran, when we read in Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, is the key to unlock the mysteries of the universe. There's a mathematical equation that is encoded in the Al-Fatiha of the attributes of Allah that are contained in there, which are beneficence, mercy, which are nurturing, and then of course that balance of those attributes, those three attributes are what we call the master of the day of judgment, And so in order to unlock the power, we have to start with God. We have to reflect God, and we have to act in the manner as the God, with having the requisite amount of love, because that's what those three attributes represent: beneficence, mercy, and nurturing. And love is the creative force behind the universe that we exist in, and love will be the creative force that will bring in the new world. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said that we don't love enough. Now, love is not a fussy feeling that makes you have goosebumps and your hair stand up on the back of your neck. It's deeper than that. So we can't love like that. Not that kind of love. So anyway, any thoughts about this whole concept of why didn't he just, call it, am I going too far off in left field with this whole concept of why didn't he just call us scientists in the first place? He could have just taught us some science experiments and set us off. But we started off with the founder of Unlike Attract and Like Repel was this man named Yakub. And he was playing with having a little science experiment at 6 when he was playing with 2 pieces of steel. And he came up with the conclusion that he was going to make a man that was going to rule his uncle. So we have to think about when we're doing this education. I'm going to let you go, Sister Demoiselle. As we kind of started off, we don't want to create something that will cause mischief and the shedding of blood with an education like this because we think that we are better. We want to deal with the issue of that, which, that has been what we've been dealing with since the creation of this universe. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say with Yakub and him playing with the 2 pieces of steel at 6, again, he had a foundation of education. So he knew he was God already. So, he didn't have to, certain things he didn't have to bend his mind to understand because he already had it.
What kind of environment will produce that? And do you think it's possible?
Yeah. But and then also again, the type of environment he had to be playing with pieces of steel, not to just hurt himself or somebody right then.
Mm-hmm.
Again, he had a certain environment, a certain level of education, even at that age.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's give someone nowadays a child two pieces of steel, they're gonna be throwing it across the room, might put somebody out, So, and again, like Sister Gabrielle said, you give uh somebody who really doesn't understand certain things a certain amount of power, what they could do. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you give a baby, some power, they might, you know, tear up the house a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but you give somebody an adult that same power, but with the mentality of a child and the emotion of a child, the type of damage that it would cause.
Well, I would beg to say that that's what we're looking at right now in this world. This world
Absolutely.
is ruled by children.
Yes.
I think the
Yes.
minister talked about them two children in the baby bed,
And he was
throwing
talking about the
stuff.
presidents. Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
But
Yeah,
also, when parents are asleep, if you allow children, you know,
come on
you
now.
you you have your children in the house, especially toddlers or you know 5-year-olds
That's right.
perhaps, and you fall asleep, take a nap, you wake up, your house is tore up.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were awake, that would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
That would never happen because you wouldn't allow it. They knock over something, you might clean it up, or depending on how old the child is, you clean that up. But
That's
when
right.
you're asleep, you can't tell them anything.
Children go outside and play in the street, all kind of stuff.
Oh
Having
yeah, people find 3-year-olds outside in the middle of the street all the time
all the time.
because somebody fell asleep. So, you know,
So
and
we have been sleeping as parents, as the original people.
yes, and a lot of times I'm not necessarily like this, but sometimes people um you can't just wake them up out of their sleep and they're able to
Mm-hmm.
get up and function properly.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are not like that. You
Yes,
wake them, it takes them a while to wake up. And some people, even though they may get out of bed, they're still not awake.
right.
They look as if they're awake, but they're not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're not totally aware.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the Sister Gabrielle read last week. She said, and most honorable Elijah Mom, and the simple things that you say are so profound. Said that we suffer from amnesia. We are people, and that's somebody when you have totally forgotten who you are. You have no concept of who you are, where you are, anything of your past existence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's analogous of being asleep as well. Sister Gabrielle?
And I
Oh,
must
go
say
ahead.
before she
Mhm.
said it, not only that, that's scary. You ever, somebody been hit in the head or whatever may happen, and they don't know who they are, and they have to rely on other people
Oh,
to tell them who they are. How do I know that you're not somebody trying to hurt me? You're trying to tell
that's
me who
deep.
I am, but I don't know you. I don't remember you. You know, if I
They could
can't
give
even
you
remember
a
my own
whole new
new
personality, a whole
identity,
new.
yes.
That's deep.
And so that's scary for someone to put their total trust in someone that they don't remember to tell them who they are
And
and where they
that's
come
the
from.
condition that we have been in for the last 450 years. We've been being told who we are by people that we did not know before we got amnesia. That's deep. That's why that we have to take charge of our own education, because that's what telling somebody about, you know, who you are, where you are, that's education.
Mm-hmm.
Sister Gabrielle?
So, you mentioned something about Yakub and what had to be the conditions that he was in for him to, come up with that. And so I was thinking about another condition that's even bigger than just him in his household was the the minds of the people at that time. So we know that
Right.
there was
Mm-hmm.
a dissatisfaction rate that
Mhm.
existed. So again, this is even before the devil is made.
Mm-hmm.
There was already dissatisfaction, and it was
Right.
the dissatisfaction that brought about the change. And so Yakub was a product of the dissatisfaction of the people at the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it was predicted, in the year one that that man would be born to bring in a whole new world.
Mhm.
But this world that he was going to bring in was a temporary world.
Mm-hmm.
But now is we have the same thing going on, is that this man under the name of Jesus is born from the dissatisfaction of the people to
Mhm.
bring in a whole new world. But this world is going to be an everlasting world. So going to your question of, again, why didn't he just come and tell us everything in the beginning? It's because his mindset is longevity,
Mhm.
not brevity. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And
Mhm.
so when you're building a building that is going to be very tall, you have to go deep into the ground. So for a small building, the foundation of the base, like, is not going to be as strong as say, for instance, a skyscraper.
Mhm.
Right.
And so again, same thing with the tree, is that when you see what you see above ground is only a part of it, but the
Mm-hmm.
roots go just as deep
Mm-hmm.
and just as wide. So again,
Right.
and we talked about this earlier, but it's possible. It really is. And when you're talking about mathematics and STEM and this type of education, as your mentor and mine as well, Dr. Bagayoko, he was telling you, he would give everybody the speech that he would come in contact with, is that mathematics is not probably, he said it is the easiest subject to learn.
That's right.
But because he said that with mathematics is step based.
Mhm.
With mathematics, if you do it correctly, you will always get the right answer. There's no ambiguity. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
subjective thing where one person would see and say, I like it, I don't like it. With mathematics, it just is. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but the problem, as he explains, is that a lot of time the reason people have issues with mathematics is because they skip steps.
Mhm.
And so mathematics might have a lot of steps, but if followed correctly, you will always get the correct result.
Right.
And that's the thing,
Always.
is that, so when we're talking about Master Fard Muhammad trying to
Well,
use this.
can you hold that point? Because I want to add
Okay.
to that. I want to add to, please do not forget your point. There's another thing in mathematics, as I started teaching math on a collegiate level. I realized that, well, I didn't realize it, I knew it before I started, but it became more and more apparent as I was dealing with adults. Part of what the difficulty is in learning mathematics is that every discipline has its own language.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times what happens is that we can't interpret the language of mathematics. And I would always use, I would tell the students that, like Sister Gabrielle said, I can be speaking Chinese right now and you can hear me, but you can't interpret what I'm saying because you don't know Chinese. And if you knew Chinese, it would be a simple conversation. For example, if I had an exclamation mark and I asked you, what did that mean in mathematics? If you don't know what an exclamation mark is in mathematics, it's impossible for you to solve the problem. But it's a very simple problem. So if I say, first of all, you have to know, and then what I would tell them is that all mathematics boils down to 4 basic operations. There's division, subtraction, or division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction, period. But you have to be able to decode the language to know which category that it fits in. And so I'm saying that to say that if I put 3 factorial or 3 exclamation mark on the board and ask you to solve the problem, if you don't know an exclamation mark, that could be the longest problem in the world for you because you can't solve it. And it's so simple that once you understand that The exclamation mark is called factorial. And you know that factors fit into the category of multiplication. You know, whatever that problem is has something to do with multiplication. So 3 factorial is simply saying 3 times 2 times 1. So you take the number itself, you multiply it to the number times the number that's 1 less than that number, times 1 less than that number, and that 3 factorial is simply 6. But if you don't know the language, you can't be able to solve it. So not only is it step-based, if you miss a step, you have to speak the language. Okay, back to you, Sister Gabrielle.
Oh, well, same thing is that, again, when you're trying to do something that's, or build somebody using this spiritual mathematics, there are a lot of steps. But if you do each step properly in the proper order, you will get the product. But the thing is now this is where character comes in.
Well, Islam is mathematics. Now you're dealing with the real mathematics that Master Farad Muhammad talked about. We think is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, it's the mathematics of building the human being and building human potential to operate on the side of righteousness.
Right, but you're talking about, you know, the making of a God. So again, that, like I said, this is where character comes in. Is that when something is difficult and it's going to take a long time, it's going to test your resolve. It's going to test your endurance. It's going to test your patience. And like somebody said, like when you're preparing for a marathon, you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm gonna. You can't say
You clicked your video off. Okay.
I think I bumped my camera, but my voice is still there.
Yes.
But you can't just wake up one day and say I'm going to run a marathon, because you have to acclimate your body to the distance that you're going to go. And so you have to prepare well in advance before you actually start to attempt to even do the race.
That's right.
And so it's going to take discipline of diet. You can't eat potato chips and soda pop and have your body able to perform this difficult task. You're not going to be able to sit on the couch, you know, and not exercise and be expected to perform this task. But the thing is that with anything is difficult, it's going to take that character. And so that's why with anything, that character has to go first, because you're building that foundation to make a God.
After difficulty comes ease, or with difficulty.
Right, but not just that. But now let's look at what you're trying to build in a God. Now, when you think of God, you really have to, if you really want to understand the magnitude of a God, you really have to go back to the originator. And this is a conversation again that I was having with Daia, my niece, Sister Damisel's daughter. She asked me a question. She was watching some YouTube video, and the person was eating. It was like a Korean woman. She was eating soul food for the first time because her husband, she was married to a black man, and so she was eating yams. And so Daia was like, you know, because the Korean lady, she was like, oh, this is really good. And Daia was like, what type of food is that? I want to taste it. And so I told her, no, we don't eat yams, because, you know, that's what we're taught in the How to Eat to Live. And so she fires back, well, I just want to taste it. I just want to try it one time, because, she just wants to experience it. She wants to know. She's curious about it because she's never done it. And so we get on this long reason, because she was like, okay, well, if Spring Visit says we can't eat yams, why can't we eat yams? And so I started to break down the science of how, certain foods are not fit for human consumption. And you have different types of animals that have different bodies, and based on their makeup, they have different needs, and you can't give everything the same, because that wouldn't be right to give something that it can't use. And I said, so with our body, even with the food that we are allowed to eat, everything that we eat, we can't even use. I said, that's why you have a waste management system. And I was like, so all the food that you eat, why all the food that you put in your mouth, it doesn't come out? And it's because some of it is absorbed by the body, but there's a large amount of it that the body rejects or can't use, and it passes as waste. So I said, and then that goes into, so you're putting a lot of things in your body that your body can't digest, and that's why you need to fast every month for 3 days to clean your blood system. And so, and then we go from that. And she was like, okay, so she asked a question like, why does what is it in the food that our body needs? So again, I start to break down the vitamins and how your body uses these materials to actually build itself up. I was like, why is it that human beings get taller? We start off as these small things, and then we grow into these big things. It's because we are taking in things, and what that thing we are taking in helps build us up until we reach the point that we can't grow. And so then I talked about, I was like, Daia, you have to understand that the human body, it's amazing. I said, it's self-healing. I said, if I kick a hole in this wall, I said, there's going to be a hole there, and it's not going to get fixed until I patch it. But if I cut myself, I make a hole in my skin, and it just starts to repair itself without I don't have to do anything. It's just going to repair itself. So I started explaining the science of why you have a scab, and if you it might scab over, but when you peel back that scab, there's new flesh there, and it's not just a hole. And I said, but think about this. The originator had to sit down and think all of this out before it even came about. And I said, do you understand how hard that is? I said, have you ever tried to imagine something? I said, for you, it seems like you've been thinking about it for minutes, but in reality, it happened that fast. So I said, so when you try to hold on to a thought for more than just a second, you know how hard that is? So she's artistic, so she draws. I said, just like when you draw, there's an image in your mind, but you bring it out of your mind because you imagine, you hold the thought, and then before you can forget it, you hurry up and write it down. But then you say, okay, that doesn't look like what was in my mind. You erase, and then you close your eyes, think about it, and you catch the thought and hurry up and write it down. And I said, but guess what? When you finish that image that was in your mind, it's only 2D. You can only see it from one perspective. It doesn't move, it doesn't think, it doesn't breathe, it doesn't reproduce, it is not even living, and it's very limited. So just imagine how long you would have to hold a thought to create something that's so advanced that it can process what it needs without even having to think about it. So I'm like, so we go off into this. So again, when you say that you want to be a God, or want to produce a God, it's going to take and then before I get in that, and then after a lot of the originator did all of that, he condensed it down to a 9-month process. where you again, he recreates all the things that he did in 9 months, and it's a fully functioning human being with his own thoughts, own personality, and there's billions of us on the earth right now, and not one of us are the same. So when your goal is God, this is something that takes supreme character, perfect character, impeccable character, not even to be a God, but to become a God, to learn how to be a God. Just to learn it takes character, because that task of God is so lofty and so difficult that it takes nothing short of perfection as a student.
That's right.
So that's you just have to put this in. You really have to think about what it is that you're saying. And when you take that elevated, that scope, when you're looking from that heaven down and you're putting things in perspective, everything becomes a lot less, you know, significant is used. Your problems become like insignificant when you're dealing with the real problem that the originator set in motion. You know, so you really can't even begin to even understand where we are today unless you know. You have to, every time you analyze something, you have to go back to the beginning. And so yes, that yeah, you can't put the cart before the horse. That's what I was saying all that for.
Yes, basically. So in other words,
Mathematics.
yes, mathematics. It has to be step-based. It has to be, you have to understand the language. You have so many different, it's multi-faceted, multi-pronged approach to building human potential. And so, you know, in this world, because as you said, we were on a they were on a timetable. There's a saying that you hear Caucasians say, live fast, die young. So the point is that they know that their time is limited. So they are, like they say, going for the gusto. And they don't wait to do something. They do it. We, being a people who at a cellular level understand that we come from a time of infinity and we're going to return to a time of infinity, we tend to take longer and we wonder why we do this. It's almost like we don't think that we have, you know, we really don't. That's really what it is. Time is not it's a factor, and it's a very important factor because you must do things in time, in the proper term, but at the same time, on the grand scale of things, we're an eternal people. As Sister Danielle said, there's a fail-safe that is coded into our very genetics that we can't even destroy ourselves. So as crazy as we may act sometimes, and as much damage as we can do to ourselves, we can't even destroy ourselves as a people. The universe.
I mean, because if we destroy us, then that everybody goes. So you can't.
This is true. That's true. The world cannot exist without the original man. So people think that they can go to another planet or go. You can't exist without us. So
Nope.
yeah. So with that being said, I mean, it's been a very good substantive conversation. As we want to say, we did get started a little late, and we did have some technical difficulty. So with that being said, we did take a little extra time to go and finish our point. And the point is that what we call the supreme wisdom lessons, that's the real STEM, because we can't just be such materialists that we think that if we learn just mathematics on its face, or if we learn science on its face, or if we learn technology, then we're producing the FOI or the MGT, the gods that are supposed to, that Master Farad Muhammad came to make us into. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's a useful process of thinking, but it can't be devoid of the spirit. And that's one thing about taking prayer out of school. Or prayer is just a time to meditate on the Creator. Separating church and state. You can't really separate church and state if God is the head of state. And so, but at the same time, we have to be very careful because man has perverted religion. All religions have been perverted. Mm-hmm. So we have to, the God within has to come forth, and it can't be someone who's self-centered and operating out of ego, because you do have gods that simply operate on the negative side, and we call that Satan. Mm-hmm. And that's not a sustainable model, because you will ultimately wind up destroying yourself. in the attempts to destroy other people. So with that being said, we encourage all of us who have the lessons, who have been enrolled in the classroom of God, to re-examine it. And like we say, this is education reimagined on a level that this world has not seen, to produce out of people who were utterly destroyed a brand new civilization of peace, freedom, justice, equality, truth. And so what we really encourage for all of us to do is just put ourselves in the position of a student of the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Follow the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He is a perfect helper for a perfect God. And he is guiding us to the other side. And he's not a proud man, as his teacher said. He won't get us to the other side and say, look what I've done. He will say, look at what Allah has done. And so with that being said, I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the New World Education Podcast, Supreme Wisdom, the real STEM education. We would like for you all to please like this episode because it helps us be able to get this to more people. Our channel, since we've been doing this podcast, we have increased in subscribers. It's not about vanity or just wanting to have followers. It's literally that we want to help create motion, because education is the key, but not just any education. As the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, we need a requisite education for the time that we live in. And we would like for you, of course, to share it with your friends. And send us, if you have any questions or comments, please put it in the comment section. And tune in, of course, next week. We'll be coming back to you again with episode 10. I'm sure whatever we come up with to discuss next week will be just as fascinating. And thank you, Sister Demoiselle, for joining us. Thank you, Sister Gabrielle, for joining us. And may Allah, we were still striving. We're just about 700, how many? 70 something people away from the 1,000. That's nothing. Subscribers that we're trying to reach before December 31st. And so I think that this was a very good use of your time on October 31st, Halloween. So hopefully that you all didn't go trick-or-treating, but nonetheless, if you did, you can at least watch this after you finish trick-or-treating. Okay, well, with that being said, thank you for joining us, and may Allah bless us all with the light of his understanding as we leave you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.